Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to the Booms and Bust Show. My name is Jonathan Davis. Today is Monday, the 18th of June, 2018. My goodness me, it's practically the end of the first half of the year. In a couple of weeks' time, I'll be writing to clients and discussing what's been happening in the investments over the first 6 months of the year. And that'll be an interesting review. Of course, we had stocks fall markedly from late January, and everyone and his dog said we're all going to hell in the handcart. 2008, here we come. Old JD here was saying stuff of nonsense. It's a bull market. It's going to be a bull market for a long time. And sure enough, indices are reaching all-time highs. I think the funniest one out there right now, because, you know, there's always a problem. Is it North Korea? Is it Syria? Is it Venezuela? Is it the ECB? Is it China? Is it Israel? Is it Russia? Is it Ukraine? There's always a problem out there. And this is the one that's going to cause the stock market crash. This is the one that's going to put us into depression. Well, I've been saying for months, stuff of nonsense. And if you are subscribing to either free or paid for, quote, updates on what's happening in investments, and you should do this and you should do that, then without a shadow of a doubt, these newsletter writers have been having a whale of a time in February, March, April, telling you the sky's going to fall in, and we need to get our tinfoil hats out. We need to go into the Anderson shelters, and we need to buckle down, because now is the time when the four horsemen of the apocalypse is coming to destroy us economically, and your pensions are going to be ravaged by the nasty people who manipulate markets. Well, it simply hasn't been the case, and I strongly suggest that if that's what the newsletter writers have been sending you, immediately cancel your subscriptions. It's irrelevant that they're free. If they're crap, they're crap. Get rid of them. Get them out of your head. I have been telling you the reality because I have nothing to sell you. That's the point. I'm not selling you anything. I don't care if you take on these ideas or not. I would much prefer that you do, because then you'll have a secure and comfortable retirement, or at least more secure than if you don't. Okay. Today, in 1940, the 18th of June, the finest hour speech was given by Winston Churchill.
What General Weygand has called the Battle of France is over. The battle of Britain is about to begin. Upon this battle depends the survival of Christian civilization. Upon it depends our own British life and the long continuity of our institutions and our empire. The whole fury and might of the enemy must very soon be turned on us. Hitler knows that he will have to break us in this island or lose the war. If we can stand up to him, all Europe may be freed, and the life of the world may move forward into broad, sunlit uplands. But if we fail, then the whole world, including the United States, including all that we have known and cared for, will sink into the abyss of a new dark age, made more sinister and perhaps more protracted by the lights of perverted science. Let us therefore brace ourselves to our duty, and so bear ourselves that if the British Empire and its commonwealths last for 1,000 years, men will still say, this was their finest hour.
Right. Well, thank you, Sir Winston. Thank you for everything you did for us. Without you and people like you, I know for one, I wouldn't be here today. I would never have been born. I know for a fact, because those Nazi people would have slit the throats, gassed, exterminated, whatever, my parents and my then grandparents. So, well done to you, Winston. You'll recall a couple of months ago, the Booms and Busts show Twitter account was suspended for apparently violating their rules, with which I entirely disagree, but, you know, they have all the power. From Saturday last week, so what would that have been, the 10th of June, they soft locked the @BoomsBusts Show Twitter account, @BoomsBusts Show, and they soft locked it for 5 days. There was no correspondence, there was no warning, there was no statement of violation, there was nothing that came from Twitter. They took my follows down to 0, which means I couldn't read any tweets. I couldn't tweet. I couldn't retweet. I couldn't like. I couldn't mention. Repeatedly, I emailed Twitter support. They kept saying to me, there's no issue. Either they screwed me, or it was a repeated mistake. What do you think, guys? The most depressing point of it all was I wasn't able to see or comment, see the tweets of the Free Tommy Robinson demo of the what would that have been, the 11th, I think it was, of June. Might have been the 10th, the 11th of June, I think it was, or it might have been the 10th. I'm sorry. 15 to 20,000 people turned up at that demo, and I have never been to a major football game. We'll talk about football in a couple of minutes, as you can imagine, World Cup and all that. But to hear thousands of men and women chanting, "Oh, Tommy, 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 Tommy Robinson." To hear thousands of people chanting that again and again is really quite emotional. It really was. It was a superb demo. I heard some very interesting speeches from Gerard Batten, Anne-Marie Waters, Shazia Hobbs, Raheem Kassam, and others. Pretty good speeches, all told. It was extremely good-natured, the whole demonstration, the walk from Nelson's Column down to down to Downing Street, where we finished off in front of a stage and heard the speeches. I think I'd like to point out that the attendees, from memory, because it was now 2 weeks ago, or a week and a half, the attendees were 95% male. I would say 97% white. There were lots and lots of tattoos. huge numbers of massive-chested working men, double-barreled chested. Clearly, they work hard for their living. I'd like to ask, bearing in mind that although it was, of course, a demonstration about freeing Tommy Robinson, it was essentially about free speech. It wasn't about anti-Islam, although that did come out, but that wasn't the primary issue. The primary issue was free speech, and therefore free Tommy Robinson, who, I'll remind you, on the same day was prosecuted, found guilty, and sentenced to 13 months in prison. When in the history of the United Kingdom have you ever heard of such a series of events in the space of 2 or 3 hours? I would suggest to you never. That a reporter has been imprisoned on the same day that he was prosecuted in the United Kingdom in the year 2018. We've never heard of such a thing happening. So given it was primarily about free speech, where were the Hindus? Where were the Sikhs? Where were the Jews? It's true. Amongst the England and Union Jack flags, there were a couple of stars and stripes. There were also a couple of stars of David, the blue and white Israeli flag. So there were a small number of Jews, but there weren't that many. Where were the Muslims? Given that it was primarily about free speech, where were all the others? All I saw were largely white working class males who get it. How come they're the only ones in the country who seem to get it? Where was everyone else? Still talking about Twitter. As I say, I wasn't able to get involved with the correspondence, with the conversation on Twitter about that amazing demo. I should point out that there's going to be another demo in London in the middle of July. Just keep following your normal Twitter and Facebook feeds and you'll get all the details. Eventually, when I corresponded with Twitter, I got this email from them. Hello, your account is now unlocked and we're sorry for the inconvenience. Twitter has automated systems that find and remove automated spam accounts, and it looks like your account got caught up in one of these spam groups by mistake. Oh yeah. This sometimes happens when an account exhibits automated behaviour. What automated behaviour? In violation of the Twitter rules. What automated behaviour? I am not a robot. Again, we apologise for the inconvenience. Please do not respond to this email's replies will not be monitored. Thanks, Twitter support. I go back to my earlier question. Either they screwed me or it was a mistake. What do you think, guys? Talking of Twitter, on Thursday, a California Superior Court judge ruled for, quote, white advocate, unquote, Jared Taylor of the American Renaissance organization, who sued Twitter for banning his account over his political views. Twitter lost its bid to dismiss a lawsuit by the, quote, white advocate, unquote, who was banned from the site in a challenge to the company's ability to exclude users it deems objectionable. California Superior Court Judge Harold Kahn in San Francisco said Taylor properly supported his allegations that Twitter's policy of suspending accounts, in the judge's words, quote, at any time for any reason or for no reason, unquote, may be unconscionable, and that the company calling itself a platform devoted to free speech may be misleading and therefore fraudulent. During the hearing, Twitter argued that it has every right to discriminate. They argued that they would never do so. Ha, ha, ha. In oral argument, Judge Kahn asked, Twitter can discriminate on the basis of religion, or gender, or sexual preference, or physical disability, or mental disability? Counsel for Twitter conceded that it claimed that right, even thought it would never exercise it. Judge Kahn denied that Twitter has such a right. It's still the very early stages of the court proceedings, but American Renaissance has won round one. Who knows? Maybe finally we're starting to get the Southern California fascists who run social media globally, not so much in China or the Middle East, where they're largely somewhat banned. Certainly in China they are. But maybe we might get some movement towards free speech, although I don't actually expect it. Now, I'm not going to spend much time on the Department of Justice releasing the Inspector General's report on the Hillary Clinton probe into her emails. You know, she had 33,000 emails on a private server as Secretary of State, which was wholly criminal, totally illegal. I'm not going to spend much time on it, just to say the Inspector General's report says that Comey, the head of the FBI, is at fault. They noted that the FBI had hostility against Trump. It also showed categorically that Barack Obama lied when he said he knew nothing about Clinton's secret email scheme. How can we say it's categorical? Because he was personally receiving and responding to emails on a private email system. I'm not going to spend much time on that, and that's as much as I'm going to spend on it. I'm going to mention as well that Trump and Nikki Haley, the wonderful US ambassador to the United Nations, they have decided to withdraw from the wholly corrupt, fascist United Nations so-called Human Rights Council. Do you know who's on this Human Rights Council? Saudi Arabia. Who else? Pakistan. Let me tell you another story about Pakistan when I can find it in my notes here. Just give me a second. Ms. Asia Bibi has been sentenced to death on trumped up blasphemy charges. Her so-called crime was that she had a drink of water and soiled a cup shared by her Muslim co-workers. For this crime, she's already been in a Pakistani jail for 9 years. And they are on the United Nations Human Rights Council. Good on you, Trump and Nikki Haley. Quite right. In a similar vein, Turkey has just finished building a wall more than 750 kilometers in length along its border with Syria. I'm not aware of anyone screaming Nazi at them for doing this. Are you? Let's move on. What have the three following countries got in common? China, a population of nearly 1.4 billion. India, a population of over 1.3 billion. The United States of America, a population of 325 million. What have they got in common? They didn't qualify for the Russia World Cup. Iceland, a population of 334,252, did qualify for the World Cup against extremely strong European competition. I see Iceland just did very well against Argentina with a 1-1 draw. And the official Twitter account of the Falkland Isles tweeted, "Argentina doesn't do well against small islands, does it?" At the end of last week, the star footballer Cristiano Ronaldo was given a 2-year suspended jail sentence and a fine of 19 million euros to settle his tax fraud case. That evening, in the Portuguese team, he scored 3 against Spain. And by the way, the tax fraud took place in Spain. Absolutely fantastic. Wonderful. England, of course, playing for the first time today, Monday the 18th. Yesterday, during a break from last-minute training, the England squad visited a Russian orphanage. It was overheard said, "It's heartbreaking to see such desperation and lost hope in their faces," said little Vladimir, age 6. Today, in market history, in 1933, President Roosevelt signed arguably the greatest act of Congress of the 20th century. The Glass-Steagall Act. You might have heard of the Glass-Steagall Act, but wondered what it was. Well, quite simply, it separated commercial lending banks from investment banks. So the likes of JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Citigroup, and in Britain, with a similar act of separation, HSBC, Barclays, Lloyds, they could either be investment banks in the city, in Canary Wharf, or they could be normal commercial lending and deposit-taking banks in deepest, darkest Hertfordshire and Leeds and up in Inverness. But an investment bank could not be in the same group as a commercial bank. Now, you may recall the phrase Big Bang. I think it was 1986, I think it was, in the UK. In the US, they got rid of Glass-Steagall. Who got rid of it? A Republican? No. Bill Clinton got rid of Glass-Steagall. Practically his last act as president. 1999. And 9 years later, the global banking system exploded. For 60 years, Glass-Steagall had kept the global economy on an even keel. Of course, it had its ups and downs, but they weren't huge ups and they weren't huge downs. Okay, 73, 74 was a huge down, but 1 in 60 years, not terrible. Instead, we had the dot-com collapse. We had the banking collapse. They took place within the same decade. And the only reason why we haven't had a collapse since 2009 is because of gargantuan, criminal level quantitative easing and zero interest rates. We'll, of course, be coming back to interest rates later in the programme, following last week's raise by the Fed in America. Because investment banks were able to buy commercial banks, all that deposit money, as soon as you deposit it into Barclays, it's in the financial system. It's Barclays then take that money. It's no longer yours. You think that's your money? First of all, try getting it out in cash. Secondly, it's immediately in the global banking system. I'm already at 27 minutes. I'm going to have to miss that topic. I might come back to it if I've got time. You should know that at this point in time, Angela Merkel's position as long-time Chancellor of Germany is fragile. Why? Because the AfD, Alternative for Deutschland, for Germany, they're in the polls. They are practically neck and neck with Merkel's SPD at approximately 16-17% of the electorate. They are above the Greens, and they've been above the Greens for months now, although the Greens are just behind, but they have been above for months. Germany's the greenest country in the whole of Europe, politically and indeed economically. And her fragile coalition is on the brink over her totally liberal immigration policy. A chap called Peter Ruff of the Hudson Trust Institute, he said, I'm in Berlin and you can cut the tension with a knife. Merkel is on the brink at the moment. In fact, one foot is over the ledge and she's peering into the abyss. AfD may be merely in opposition, but their pressuring of one of the coalition parties, the CSU, from the right may lead to the end of her chancellorship. The Interior Minister, Seehofer, he may set a 2-week deadline for her to adjust the refugee policy, or he will act. Possibly she will come under a vote of no confidence. So, we shall see how that develops. We talked about Tommy Robinson a few minutes ago. Over 600,000 online signatures for the free Tommy Robinson petition. Absolutely fantastic. Why don't you, on top of signing that petition, why don't you write a postcard to Rory Stewart EW, Rory Stewart MP, Minister for Prisons, House of Commons, Westminster, SW1 0AA, and ask him, what are you doing to keep Tommy Robinson safe? Move him to a safe place. Emails can be deleted or ignored, but a mountain of paper or cardboard cannot. I wanted to mention this, I noticed on Twitter, from Andrew Pierce, who's on LBC. He's also an associate editor of the Daily Mail. He said, I got a call on my LBC radio show. A chap's house was burgled and the police say they had no chance of finding the culprits. He tweets a mildly offensive cartoon he mentions a mildly offensive cartoon on Facebook, and 5 policemen turned up at his front door. And I know there are police-loving people who listen to the Booms and Bus show, but you tell me that that's appropriate behaviour. You tell me that's what our police should be doing. Getting back to the Bramoners, Mrs. Banahan, a retiree from Farndon in Cheshire, sent an email to her MP by the name of, I don't know her first name, Sandbach is her surname, her Tory MP. Miss Sandbach's disloyalty and untrustworthiness has destroyed any chance of my ever supporting the Edisbury Conservatives while she remains in post. I will work hard to ensure her lack of loyalty to her party, Prime Minister, government and voters is as widely known as possible to make sure people wishing to vote Conservative know she cannot be trusted. That was the email. A few days later, Sandbach responded with, your email address has been added to my blocked email as there is a strict policy against abusive emails operated by this office, and your email, get this listener, has also been reported to the police. In future, if you wish to contact me, you will have to do so in writing. Mrs. Banahan then said to anyone who would listen, Sandbach has ensured I will do everything I can to make her treachery known. I will work hard to ensure her lack of loyalty to her party is as widely known as possible to make sure people wishing to vote Conservative know she cannot be trusted. I hope the Edisbury Conservatives will seriously consider deselecting her for such a selfish and self-centred betrayal of the party and country. If you haven't got it yet, Sandbach is a massive Remainer. Banahan said she was, quote, completely floored, unquote, when she received the reply from Sandbach a few days later, branding her email abusive and reporting her to the police. Remainers are not right in the head. And you know obviously about the NHS nonsense that May's going to spend billions on the NHS. I mean, talk about funding a bottomless pit, for goodness sake. By the way, if you hear any Labourite saying either it's disgusting or it's pathetic or whatever, just bear in mind this. Who said this in February? We will use funds returned from Brussels after Brexit to invest in our public services and the jobs of the future, not tax cuts for the richest. Jeremy Corbyn in Coventry. We should send him there again. The Brexit thing is getting very serious now. We're heading into July. There's only 9 months to go until theoretically we Brexit. Goodness knows what David Davis, Liam, what's his name, are doing. Liam Fox, Angela Leadsom has reportedly been saying that the government will run out of time to act on all the Lords, etc. amendments if there's no agreement with the EU by October. Shocker. Imagine doing nothing for 2 years and this is the result. I'm totally shocked. If we don't get Brexit by a no-deal WTO terms, or Brexit and we're out with an agreed deal and we're out. It'll be the biggest constitutional crisis since that nonsense with Mrs. Simpson in the 1930s. But that was nonsense. This is unbelievably serious. I was having a chat with a mate, increasingly close friend, the other evening. We were just sitting, shooting the breeze as you do. And he's a businessman, a Remainer. But why is he a Remainer? Because he reads the papers. Okay. So ultimately I asked him the question because he was pushing me on Labour to pick the fruit and veg in Norfolk. Where are we going to get labourers from? I said, well, just going to have to pay more money, whatever. I said, but come on, seriously. Are you seriously telling me that it comes down to either the Norfolk farmer has got a fruit picker or we get democracy? Which is it to be? And in the space of an hour and a half of talking about this stuff, he was a Remainer and he said, Jonathan, I want my kids to have the best opportunity. So it's not about the Norfolk farmer. I want democracy. He didn't quite say he'd moved to being a Brexiter, but I think he was getting the point. It was nice. Good news in Colombia. They've escaped the risk of becoming Venezuela. In the general election, Ivan Duque, D-U-Q-U-E, he's just won the presidential election as the country has rejected the communist Petro Gustavo. And Duque won 54% to 42% with several percent spoiled or whatever. So good news for Colombia. Well done to you. Moving swiftly to economics. Very, very interesting the last couple of weeks. The Mario Draghi, the president of the European Central Bank, Goldman Sachs, of course, and no doubt when he leaves, he'll get a cushy €10 million a year job as some kind of a director in Goldman's, JP Morgan, or the like. Talking of which, actually, I want to mention Deutsche Bank. I wanted to mention it earlier. You know, when I was talking about newsletters to which you subscribe, whether you pay or whether you don't pay, if they've been telling you that Deutsche Bank is the thing that this time is going to destroy the global economic system, I'm telling you right now, when I look at the chart of DB, the price chart of the share price, what I see is a share that's going to rocket over the next months and the next couple of years. And when I say rocket, I mean it's going to be Apollo 11 all over again. Absolute aren't nonsense. You watch the DB price over the next months and couple of years, and if it soars, as I'm suggesting it will, do us a favour, unsubscribe from all those leeches who are preying upon your time and maybe even your hard-earned money. They're not doing you any favours. What they're doing is selling their blooming newsletters. They're not there to educate you. They're not there to make you money. I am. So the European Central Bank has pulled off what it often does, and Draghi has, a familiar trick of in the regular meeting when he comes to meet the press, they've struck a dovish tone to the hawkish decision that they're ending quantitative easing in 2018. Now, listener, the European Central Bank has been printing hundreds of billions of euros a month and putting it into the system for the last few years. whatever it takes. That's what he said. He said, whatever it takes. Whatever it takes to keep my banker friends as multimillionaires and billionaires, whatever it takes to help the elite, to help the Bilderberg, to help the Davos community, whatever it takes to help the establishment. That's what it was meant by whatever it takes. Not help the economy. You help the economy by helping the bottom 90%, 90. You do not help the economy by helping the top 10%. He was dovish because he said that there would not be any interest rate hikes until at least the summer of 2019, a year away. Just as it took the Fed a year to raise rates after ending QE, the European Central Bank is attempting a similar plan. There is, however, a major difference between 2015 and now, which may scupper that con game. 3 shells and the pea. That's what's going on there. In 2015, the global price of oil was plummeting. We were in deflation. There was actually a stocks bear market. I know that the likes of the S&P only went down about 15%, 2015, 2016. I know that. But look underneath the bonnet. There was stock after stock after stock that went down 25 to 50%. It was a bear market, 2015 into 2016. We don't have a bear market. We have a bull market, and the price of oil is soaring. I know it's come back from $73 to $64 West Texan crude. I know that, but I've been saying for weeks and months, it's a bull market in crude. Even if it sizably pulls back, it's still a bull market until we get evidence saying it isn't. Indeed, just today, OPEC and Russia agreed to increase production 600,000 barrels. So now we know probably why the price of oil pulled back in the last month from $73 a barrel to 64. You're thinking, well, an increase in production 600,000, that's bearish in the price, isn't it? Listener, it's incredibly bullish because the word was out that they'd be increasing production by over 1 million. So they're actually not increasing to the level that the market expected. Unsurprisingly, we're getting a bounce in oil and global energy shares today. I'm talking to you at approximately 3:30 in the afternoon of 18th of June. No, oil and global energy shares are in a major, major bull market. Indeed, I just read that Pierre Andurand, who runs a £1 billion oil hedge fund, he's even talking now. And by the way, this guy's one of the smartest oil players on the planet. This guy's talking about he can smell $150 oil coming over the next couple of years. Now, there is nothing in the chart to yet suggest that. He knows the macro. I have some understanding of the chart. I'm looking at the price of oil going to the 80s, and to remind you, it bottomed at 26 in February 2016. He's talking about $150. I'm talking about the 80s in the medium term. Either way, we're both talking inflation and we're both talking bull market globally. That's what we are talking. So, interesting times. The newspapers called it the end of an era, where the E was the euro. They're calling time on the $2.4 trillion bond buying program. Although, as I say, they've extended for a year when they're going to raise interest rates, bearing in mind the European Central Bank rate is negative. It's frightening. So, in due course, with the end of European QE, that will be positive for the euro in due course. And indeed, if ECB ever does actually raise interest rates, that will be uber bullish for the euro. Then we'll have to see what's happening across the pond. They're already now up to 1.75%. Think about that. The base rate in America is at 1.75%. In Britain, it's at 0.5%. In the Euroland, it's minus 0.4%. What a massive difference between America, Europe and the UK. Massive difference. Europe and the UK will have to raise interest rates. It's hugely political. That's the reason why they haven't raised up till now. They will have to. And I tell you, as this inflation gets going, as global interest rates are rising, when eventually the Bank of England does raise rates, it'll be faster and sharper than the very glacially slow speed of raising that the Americans have been doing, which is one of the reasons why their economy is, one of the many reasons why their economy is stronger than ours, because they're taking action. Now, of course, we should all have been taking action 5 years ago. That didn't happen, but at least the Americans are taking action now, which means they can do it gradually. When we come to do it, it'll be a car driving at 70 miles an hour, banging into a big brick wall. Maybe the Turkish wall between Turkey and Syria. Now, I've said before about how the artificial intelligence, how the robots are entirely going to destroy hundreds of millions of global jobs. I mean, think 20 years from now. How about this though? Think today. What's the greatest named company on the planet? Of course, it's JD.com, the multi-$100 billion company in China, the Chinese e-commerce gargantuan. It's just built a huge new Shanghai fulfillment center. You know, like Amazon's massive fulfillment centers. Get this. It can organize, pack and ship 200,000 orders a day. Do you know how many people it employs? I'll let you guess. Does it employ 4,000? Does it employ 400? It employs 4 people to service the robots. Who are the masters now? Which means, as investors for our retirements, we need to be investing in high tech. No question, this is going to be a hugely successful enterprise. But tell me this doesn't back up my thesis that AI and robotics are going to put hundreds of millions out of work. And those jobs are not going to come back. 4 people. If you think about where to go on holiday, well, you could do worse than thinking of going to Argentina. Argentina, who we know loves the Falkland Islands and Iceland. The peso has been in free fall for the last couple of years. In the summer of 2016, it was 14 pesos to a US dollar. It's now 28 to $1, it's lost half its value. Can you imagine how cheap it is to have a holiday now in Argentina? Go there in the winter. It's in the southern hemisphere. Very nice. Now, I've talked about inflation many times, and indeed, the US CPI has just risen to 2.8%, its highest level, get this, since February 2012. And it's just slightly under the long-term rolling historical median, I beg your pardon, between 1948 and 2018 at 2.9%. It's just below the average, for want of a better phrase. And it's heading up. Bearing in mind, in 2014, it was minus 0.2%. As I say, it's heading up. Inflation leads to higher interest rates. I'll be coming back to house prices in due course. And just remember this about how low interest rates still are. The US expansion is now 9 years long. The Fed's funds rate is 1.75%. It's still lower than at the time of the Lehman's and AIG bankruptcy in September 2008, when the US economy was in the midst of the worst recession since the Great Depression of the 1930s. Interest rates have got a long way to go in America, and more so in Britain and the EU, the Eurozone. And I will remind you that 2 weeks ago on this show, I told you that the markets were expecting it was effectively a done deal, that rates would go to 1.75%. In terms of investing, I said then 2 weeks ago that even though base rates are rising, and even though big picture long-term market rates are rising, actually there appears to be some relatively short-term building of strength in fixed interest government bonds like US Treasuries, UK gilts, German bunds, for example. But it's all I can say is it's likely to be short-term. So if you're thinking about moving away from government bonds today, this week, probably not the time to do it. It seems to me there's some strength. There could be a mini rally there. The sentiment on government bonds is as low as you'll find it. And indeed, US bond returns are now negative over the last 2 years. I might mention to you that going into 2016, my clients were 60% in long-dated US Treasuries. We're down to around 10% now because we have been rapidly selling them since 2016. The last time US bond returns were minus over 2 years was as long ago as 1981. So there is something bad long-term probably in government bonds, but short-term I'm seeing a little bit of strength. Going back to house prices, why did I even mention it? Because I mentioned rising long-term interest rates, rising base rates, which means also rising mortgage rates in the long term. The number of homes on sale in London for asking more than £1 million has risen to a record high, according to Rightmove, 19,250 such homes. It was 18,800 a year ago. The Land Registry tells us that in April, when we've got the most recent data, how many £1 million plus homes do you think were sold? Bearing in mind there's 19,250 of them on the market. 213, which means, hello, it'll take 7.5 years to sell those properties. Well, that might be, of course, a joke, but those property prices are going to have to come down a long way if people are truly serious about selling them. And that goes a long way to back up my thesis that I've said, and I'll say it again. London house prices, on average, are going to fall 16% between 2017 and 2020, at least. One of the reasons why I think US Treasuries might do well in the summer is that it looks like Western stocks, not so much Euro stocks, but the UK and the US, they're due a breather after having a pretty strong run since the 10% falls in February and March. Since then, they've come up really handsomely. So we could have a summer lull, terrible thing. But remember, it seems to me we're in a multi-year, major bull market. I said gold a couple of weeks ago could yet fall $40 or $50 to the mid-1200s. Hello! What happened to gold last week? It fell from 1310 to the 1270s. Miners haven't come down much, not as much as gold and silver came down, that's for sure. However, if gold continues to come down, and it looks as if it probably will do, down from the 1270s, down another $10, $20, $30, I think we're going to see some weakness in miners, setting up an amazing buy area. Uranium, oh my goodness, uranium itself is up. Uranium mining stocks, GCL Geiger counter, it's up to $23 from the 18s. It's up 20 to 25% in less than 2 months. Do you know what? It's not even started. US natural gas, it's above the low seen in early 2016. It's been building for 2.5 years. Have patience, mon ami. Have patience. The dollar looks as if it's still in a rising correction of a multi-year bear market. It's in a rising correction. This is bearish for precious metals and other commodities. It was Father's Day yesterday, and quote of the week, this was attributed to Mark Twain, but we don't know actually if it's true. When I was a boy of 14, my father was ignorant. I could hardly stand to have the old man around. But when I got to be 21, I was astonished at how much the old man had learned in 7 years. And on that note, listener, even on your worst day, remember this. You live better than someone 150 years ago did on their best day. I've had a blast. I'll see you next week.